The Graphic Histories Podcast.
I got bitten by a radioactive bug. I tried an experimental drug. Went up for a stroll on a gamma testing range. I found an enchanted hurricane. I made a serum that made me small. I modified the serum so it would make me tall. Radioactive isotope in my eyes. Dying alien helped me accessorize. I gained the proportion and strength of a spider. Now I'm invincible and I can fly. I lost my sight, my other senses were heightened. I'm gonna put on my pajamas and go fight crime.
Hey there and welcome to the Graphic Histories Podcast. My name is André. I am your host. Big thanks to Uka the Mock for our theme song, Superpowers. And big thanks to you, listener, for tuning in once again to another show. Today we are talking with yet another comic book store owner and operator, and this time it is Darryl Wall, the person who manages, owns, looks after, curates, if you will, the Giant Robot Comics in Dartmouth. A very cool guy, great chat. Does devolve into the nerdy quite a bit. I mean, I don't think I have to warn you. I think if you listen to the show, you're pretty familiar with how nerdy this thing can go, especially with me and another person who has a deep well of nerdness as well. And we get down to the bottom of it. We really get in there. We dig deep, and the nerdiness radiates, if you will. Just got back from a lovely weekend that I spent with some friends out in the Gaspé Peninsula, which is just over the border into Quebec. It's a really good time. Having some fun medical stuff that comes when you have a lifestyle like mine. I appear to have torn my bicep. I went to the doctor and he's confirmed it. I have to get an MRI, see if there's anything to be done as far as aesthetically to get the sort of hole that looks like, and not hole, but like there's a divot in my on the upper part of my bicep where the tendon that connected them was there and no longer is. So they may be able to reconnect. They may not. It may just be. I seem to have had no pain. I never felt it happen. Didn't seem to lose any strength either. But it is. It's there. I was doing something with the gym, just lifting weights, and I noticed there's this weird kind of divot in my arm, which looked weird. And then other folks that work at the gym said, "Yeah, you tore your bicep. We've all done this before. It sucks." Or I know someone has done it, and that's exactly what it looked like. And the doctor has hence confirmed it. So now I'm just kind of waiting on to see what happens. He he asked me when I was wrestling again, and I said this weekend, and he put his head in his hands and said, "Can you wrestle with one arm?" I did assure him I'll take a couple weeks to try to heal up a bit and not use it at the gym for a couple weeks as well. Apparently it can be fine because there are two fairly large, there's one smaller tendon and one fairly large tendon, and often the large one can pick up the slack when the little one goes, so that may be what's happening. We will find out. But I kind of have sometimes when I flex, I have like a Popeye muscle now on one side, which is fun. But yeah, no pain, no discomfort. It's very weird. And also when I was there, I had some issues with my ears. I use Q-tips in a way that I describe as aggressive sometimes. And one of my ear is feeling plugged all the time. And apparently, as often is told all the time by any experts, not to use Q-tips as deeply as we use them because they're not designed for that. Sometimes they just push wax in. Something similar to that has kind of happened, sort of scratched the inside of my ear and a bit of a infection, and so now I'm just kind of doing all the stuff you gotta do to fix that up. Basically what I'm trying to say is I'm falling apart, not at all. I feel like I'm pretty healthy all in all, except for this bicep thing, but just trying to get through, trying to stay healthy as much as possible and live this crazy wackadoo lifestyle I do, and getting there, surviving, trying to anyway. Just a reminder, if you haven't liked, subscribed already, or if you're just discovering this podcast for the first time, please do so. This kind of monitors how many downloads it gets weekly. That's how you can tell, all the marketing and the sort of stuff. So it helps me. It helps maybe eventually monetize the show by doing that. So please like, subscribe, automatically download, do all that great stuff. And enjoy the show. So also coming up down the line, we got some pretty cool folks, which I can't talk about just yet. It's kind of fun when you're trying to plan out these things. You kind of coordinate with the people you want to have in the show, the guests. And sometimes it works out. Sometimes they say it works out and then it doesn't last minute or something comes up. So you never really know. And often if that happens, we get to reschedule and the episode still happens, just not exactly when expected. Which is why I'm a little cavalier sometimes to tell you guys about the next guest, unless I already have it recorded. I don't next time, so I won't be able to give you that information now. But I do have a couple in the pipe that should be done in time to be able to announce that in the next one. That will be coming down. So at the end, I won't be giving you that. But hey, you know somebody's coming. It'll be somebody. Something's happening. But for right now, what's happening in the now, in the present, living in the today, man, we're talking to Darryl Wall, the curator, owner, operator of Giant Robot Comics, a very cool store, and we are in for a very nerdy chat. Enjoy. Actually, you navigated the pitfalls and answered the Sphinx's riddle and all the things you need to do to access Zoom.
Yes, I was like, oh, I can't. If I don't have Facebook on my computer because I've never bothered logging in,
Mm-hmm.
so I was like, oh, that's just going to send me on my phone. It's like I don't want to do this the whole time.
Sure, you can. It'll be like a Blair Witch video.
It's true. It would not be
Wonder.
the steadiest of cams, that's for sure.
That's true. If you could just like cry and get lost in the woods while you're doing it, we might have a hit
Have
picture.
one
of it.
drop of snot coming
That's
down
right.
my mouth.
I was reading something about those guys recently. I guess the actors that were in it, like, they obviously had to like hide the fact that they were who they were and even like not be seen as being alive for a while because like the
Yep.
whole thing was predicated on the idea that they all were real people that died. And
Yeah,
like,
it's pretty awesome.
I guess they got like hardly anything for it, like literally hardly any money. And now I think they're somebody on their behalf is suing something to get some small amount of it because they literally, for the amount of money that movie made, they made a few $1,000s each, and that was it.
Yeah, it was ridiculous how much, because I think it was the highest grossing like independent film of all time.
Yeah, I believe it blew. I think before that it was the Ninja Turtles movie.
It was the Ninja Turtles. That's
yeah.
my other favorite random fact.
Yeah, which like it's funny because that first Turtles movie is fantastic, and the second one has its charms, but like once the studio got involved, it became a lot less like gritty, independent feeling and more like they can't.
They got further away from like Hong Kong action as well.
Yes, that's true. But they even went to like the idea where they're like, well, they can't use their weapons, so they're just like using salami and like everything else they can do to knock people out instead of actually using the ninja weapons they carry with them 24/7.
Yeah, Leonardo uses his swords just to like get stuck in the ceiling or something. I think that was it.
Yeah, that's about as far as they got. That's really funny. Well, I see you're wearing a Shredder t-shirt.
Right.
Were turtles a big part of your youth?
They were like before I became an adult, they were like my last big hurrah as a child. And then that clearly didn't last forever.
No, that's funny. Well, like, were you always a comic fan growing up?
Yeah, like I was always a toy guy. So when I found out that there was toy comic books, well, that's what I had to get into. So I had Transformers and that kind of stuff, and that was my gateway into comics. And it's still probably one of my favorite things to read. Is like I love my Spider-Mans and stuff, but I was like, I'd rather see what Transformers are doing on a daily basis.
Well, those toy like comics are the ones that spun out of that. There's such an interesting, vibrant, like a lot of like I literally was just debating with myself a little few minutes ago because I saw a targeted ad, which is very well targeted for me, for the Kickstarter for like the G.I. Joe for Larry Hama's entire run of that, and I'm like, oh, like the hardcovers are all like really nice, and it's this big compendium set that's going to be like $400 and something Canadian when you get it all. But I was like, but they're really nice. And then I'm like, well, maybe I can just get the PDFs. And then I'm like, but that's not as cool, you know? So,
well, I was like, oh, it's $300. And I was like, okay.
American.
$100 to ship it. And that's 400 Canadian. I'm like, ugh.
Mm-hmm. No, it's 300. It's 300 American for like the set of all the compendiums.
$100 to ship it American.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go. Maybe I will just do the
400 US.
Even the PDFs is like 100 something just for the 4 PDFs. But I guess I've kind of warmed up a little bit to like the reading of the digital comics. I used to kind of poo-poo it as much as any traditionalist does. But then I grabbed the Marvel app, you know, the reading one, and like just the idea that I'm like, I want to read all of Peter David's Spider-Man 2099. And, you know, I read all of the Hulk, the Immortal Hulk story, which I never got around to reading, you know, stuff like that. So it's really neat. And I mean, as a guy that owns a comic store, I'm sure you're not a fan of it in the way that, you know, physical media is kind of your bread and butter. I mean, on top of everything else, like toys and everything you guys sell.
Yeah, it's a two-edged sword because I'm like, as a guy who has boxes of comics strewn in various places around his house, I am jealous of somebody who can walk around. It's like, I have my entire collection right here in my
Hmm.
phone.
Hmm.
But at the same time, your phone's never going to be worth money. And when those comics do disappear off some digital marketplace, because something's going to change, because it always seems to be doing that.
Hmm.
I was like, you at least still have the paper ones.
I like how as they like as I collect physical media, like I collect records and Blu-rays and like 4Ks and whatever. But I like how you kind of get your like everybody that does collect some kind of physical media has that one like line in the sand that they use as the argument. You know,
Yeah.
like I was talking to another guy that collects Blu-rays the other day, and he's asking if I've ever seen this old Charles Grodin movie called The Heartbreak Kid. Ben Stiller did a remake of it. But the
Okay.
original apparently is very, very good. But it's one of those movies that kind of slipped through the cracks and never really had like a Blu-ray or 4K or any kind of streaming thing. Like you can't find it anywhere. So he was like, this is why you need the streaming because you can't get this one movie, you know, like and 28 Days Later is another one. I guess that's into some kind of weird rights issue. So like
Oh,
I
yeah,
have the
same with like
Blu-ray.
Dogma and stuff. Like,
Yes, same thing, which I would love to have on Blu-ray, but like when you look for it, it sells for hundreds of dollars because they're like
yeah.
out of print and rare to find.
Well, like the Willow TV show. And I was like,
Oh,
I
right,
didn't
that's
really want to
gone.
see it, but I did want to see it. And I was like, I'll wait till it's all out. And then other stuff. And then I was like, oh, it's gone? It was like, I thought it would be there forever kind of thing.
Yeah, I kind of forgot about that because I wanted to watch it as well, but it's like too late. You know, it feels like you only had a few months, maybe like
Yeah.
and then they're like too late, it's completely gone. Like it's nowhere to be found. I doubt it'll ever get released in physical media because it didn't do very
It didn't
well.
do well enough. Yeah.
No,
It's
but
weird.
that's
Yeah. I think it came out in like January, finished in March, and was gone by May or something along those
that's
lines.
insane. It's like this tired thing that costs so much money. Like maybe it'll get found later. Maybe you know, the idea that they're not even giving it a shot to be is
Yeah.
kind of crazy to me. It's kind of like that whole WB thing where they're like deleting movies
Yeah. Movies,
for the
TV
tax
shows.
credits. It's crazy. Like I read this really heartfelt and kind of sad letter from Will Forte about that Coyote versus Acme
Yeah.
movie that they made, and I guess he said it was really really good, and it's incredibly sad that no one's going to get to see it.
The Batgirl movie, they did one screening for the cast and then, yep, get rid of this.
Yeah, it's wild too because it's like you'll never, in order for them to get the credit, they need to completely delete it. So like
Yeah.
they can't even like you can't even have a copy hanging around somewhere. It's got to be completely gone.
Which is mind-boggling. And like, yeah,
Yeah, they have to
it's
ensure you'll
worth
never
more
make
money
money
to
off it.
throw away than it was to show.
Yeah, you gotta believe that somebody somewhere kept a stick of it somewhere, and
Yeah.
they're afraid to get sued or something, so they're not releasing it. But well, maybe someday we'll see it.
Well, like I remember Carrie Fisher always said she had a VHS of the holiday special, and Kevin Smith supposedly has like the good cut of like Batman and Robin or Batman Forever, and so
Really?
clearly, yeah, supposedly there's a cut that's
Oh, the
really
Joel
good.
Schumacher cut. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I'd be curious to see that one too, actually, because I like that like movie. Okay, like when I was a kid, it was like I had on VHS and I probably watched it 1,000 times.
yeah.
But as an adult to go back and rewatch it, I'm sure I would not enjoy it very much because it's just kind of gone so bad shit crazy, no pun intended, sort of
Yeah.
movie. Um, but like, let's see your cat back there, very cute.
Oh yeah, he's
Yeah. Oh. Um, the idea that like this sort of nostalgia sort of leads you through it. I'm kind of afraid to rewatch it. Same with I used to have a negative opinion of the Tim Burton Batman movies, and now I think that
yep.
I'll probably like them because they'll be wild and different and kind of like, artsy at least. It's kind of like a German art house film. Like
Yeah, it definitely
the
wasn't a
second one
Batman
especially.
movie. It's miraculous it did as good as it did because you're like, yeah, once you take away all the cool things, like movie's really weird.
Yeah, but
And the
that's
second one is so horny, like it's ridiculous.
yeah. It's wild when like those directors get the chance to like the first one does well and then the second one they're like, all right, well, do whatever you want. Like the first one made millions, we want you to double that, so go nuts. And then
Yep.
they go wild and like that's one. I think Gremlins 2 is another one that just like is
Yep.
an insane sequel to the first one. I love it to death, but it's
Oh,
just
Gremlins 2. I love both Gremlins, but
me
Gremlins 2
too.
is just so weird and like when they break the fourth wall with Hulk
Hulk
Hogan.
Hogan, yeah,
Later.
and the Snow White screening where they're ripping up the control booth and
Yep.
oh the bunny ears and oh it's wild, it's insane. But Joe Dante, like I listened to a podcast he's on, he said that he just like because of the nature of how hard it was to make the first one, he was like, I'm not making another one. And they're like, here's more money. And he's like, no. And they're like, and then years go by and like, here's more money. And he's like, no. And then they're like, here's more money and like a blank check. We'll like, you like, not a blank check, but like, we will do, here's your budget, whatever, but we will have no
Yeah.
input, no say, you have final cut. And he was like, all right. And that's why it's so crazy. Like, just,
They
yeah,
basically needed another Batman before they could have a Batman or something like that.
kind of, yeah. But that's wild, wild, wild. So I guess growing up, getting like the toys were your intro into comics and into nerdom. Like, what were the
Yep.
toys you had? What were your favorite?
I was a big Transformers guy, still am.
Oh yes.
That was a lot of like Transformers #8 was like one of my first comics. And then I read Transformer comics for pretty much up until the late 80s, early 90s when I started reading Amazing Spider-Man.
Hmm.
Which I missed like I think 308 was my first Spider-Man comic.
Oh
So
wow.
missed Venom showing up.
Well, you just barely. You know,
Yep,
you got more of the cool Venom stuff coming, but
that's true.
yeah, that's cool. Yeah, Transformers is one of those ones that kind of miss me. Like when I was growing up, it was mostly Turtles and like Batman the animated series, and when I
Yeah.
could see it, because you know I only had CBC and ATV growing up, so I would catch like X-Men and those things when I was at my grandmother's, and she had
Yeah.
YTV or something or
She had the
Fox.
cool channels.
Yeah, exactly. She had cable, so you know that was like I go to Granny's stay for the weekend, mostly just so I could watch a bunch of shows they could never see at home. But yeah, Transformers is one that I kind of missed. I'd like to go like I watched Beast Wars a lot when that one came out, and that was
Nice.
sort of
Yeah.
my Transformers, I guess, because it's the one I saw the most. I had a like rabbit ear TV in my bedroom that allowed me to watch Fox, so I would get like Dragon Ball Z and like Power
Yeah.
Rangers in Space and Beast Wars and the Turtles Next Mutation show and those sort of ones when they were on. So that was kind of how I managed to get most of Beast Wars in, and then Beast Machines when that one came around.
And it wasn't nearly as good.
Interesting ideas, you know, like Beast Wars was such a, I guess like the animation was so unique for that time period. Like you had
Yeah.
Reboot in that too. But you know, I've talked to some people that have worked on it through the X-Men podcast I do with Davin and also this show. And you know, they're kind of bringing some interesting stuff there. You know, people died, people, you know, like it was
Yeah.
a little darker than your average. I mean, I guess the Transformers film from the 80s sort of
Yeah, that was
established
the
that
only time
no.
everyone died. But yeah. But like, yeah, Beast Wars, they killed off even in the second season. They're like, oh, yeah, we don't want to make these characters anymore, so kill all those guys off.
Which is cool. Like, well, at least like in a way, like me and a friend often talk about some of those properties when we were kids, right? And what they brought to the table. And a lot of them were this sort of like bleeding in of adult themes in a kid show.
Yeah.
Like there was the show Captain Power and the Soldiers of Tomorrow. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
That show was wild for a kid show. Like near the
Yep.
end, they killed off like a female character. They had somebody commit suicide. Like it was,
Yeah.
it was
But
like,
it was filmed in Canada, and I think J. Michael Straczynski wrote it.
that makes sense. He's
Says
like
a lot.
he's like the kids are ready for this.
Yeah. And like, yeah, if you watch carefully, you're like, oh, well, there's Graham Greene from North of 60 and
Mhm.
everything else. Like they needed him in there for our Canadian eyes and stuff.
Mhm.
So they're like, oh yeah, you can see all your regular Canadian actors.
Yeah, every time he pops up in something, I'm just it's like that meme where Leonardo DiCaprio points at the screen. I'm like, it's
Yeah.
great green.
Yeah, when I was watching like The Last of Us, it's like there he is, there he
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, and then of course he's in the Echo show, and like anytime they need
Yeah,
like an
that's right.
indigenous actor, he's usually in the mix. He was on Reservation Dogs. He's in like everything that shows up. That I used to always make the joke that anytime there was like indigenous character needed for any kind of thing in America, it's usually Adam Beach, I think his name is,
Yeah.
the guy that was Slipknot in the terrible David Ayer Suicide Squad movie, and then
I
like
don't know what movie you're talking about.
yeah, I like to forget that one. I love the James Gunn one, but I really
Same.
hated the David Ayer one. But the you know, and then when we're watching the new Mutants movie, and then her dad finally shows up, and it's like it's him, and I'm like, of course it is, because he's the one,
Yep.
the one actor that they troll out usually when they need you know a indigenous character to pop up. Although Zane McLaren, I think his name is the guy from he was also on Echo. He was Echo's dad.
Okay, yeah.
He was on Fargo, and he's on that Dark Sky show. He's really cool.
Never watched Dark Skies.
Yeah, my wife's reading one of the books from him. They're all based on these Tony Hillenbrand books. Like it
Okay.
was like a series of books about like an indigenous cop sort of investigating various things. I don't know if they're supernatural or how much there is to it, but I picked a couple up as just on a whim because it's kind of an interesting series, and my wife just got into them, and she says they're quite good, but I haven't got a chance to read them myself.
Nice.
So as you're going along, did you endeavor to have some kind of a career in comics as a kid, or?
I I did CG animation actually. That was my schooling. I was like, I want to do animation, and I did it for about a year. And I remember like working and working the crunch and hating it. And one time my dad's like, if you worked with me on construction, you'd make this much. And I was like, yeah, but I'm doing what I love. And he's like, you were working for $3 an hour. And I was like, fair enough. And
See,
yeah, then I was big into video games, so I worked in a bunch of video game stores, and then I finally worked in a comic book store, and then when that closed down, I saved up for a little bit and made my own comic book store.
so what you had one of those hardworking, don't understand my artsy kid dads? Yeah.
Exactly.
Construction too?
Okay, yeah, I did renovation for like a year, and then I was like, no, I need to do something that's at least involving computers or something
Were you, were
without
you, were you good at it?
at animation.
At renovations? Yeah.
I wasn't bad. I did a little bit of everything,
Hmm. Yeah, my
but
dad was a construction worker too. That's why and also kind of, yeah, a bit of a hard ass, but not like a horrible, like
right.
not
No,
bad, but
same.
just in the way that they just is like, I'm never going to understand this sort of, what my kid is into because my
What is
brother at
with
least,
all this stuff?
yeah, my brother at least like did some hunting and stuff with him when we were growing up. I never had the stomach for it. So I was like, just like drawing pictures, that was my
Yeah,
thing. And yeah, it's funny because it seems like artsy types either have the super artsy parents that are super,
yeah,
into it, or they have the wildly like construction worker dad who's this is like, why don't you get a real job kind of
yeah,
person. Did he come to accept it as your store as you got
yeah.
your own
No, it,
store?
it took a while, but after a while, he's like, "Yeah, no, I'm proud of you, doing good, and that kind of stuff."
Yeah, it's also good if you need some renovations in the store to have a dad on hand.
It's true.
Yeah.
He still helps me. I was working on my bathroom last week, and he's like, "Let me come over," and he did. I was like, "Yep." He's like, "Oh, I'm not as good as I used to be," and I was like, "Yeah, you're still better than me and most people."
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my dad's pushing what 72 now, 73,
Yeah,
but
my
he's
dad.
still yeah, well, dad's still doing shit.
Yep,
Mom's like, you got to come
magical
home and help.
dad.
Yeah, mom's like, you got to come home and help him. He wants to shingle the roof by himself, and I'm like, what? And she's like, yeah, he's gonna get up on the roof. I'm like, oh yeah, I told him, I'm like, Dad, I'll come home and help you. And he's like, oh well, I can do it. I'm like, no, just tell me when you're gonna do it. I'll come help you. Like at least carry the shit up the ladder for you or something. Like I don't know.
Yep, you'll do it wrong anyways, boy.
Yeah, pretty much. That was always dad was very or is rather very attention to detail is very important.
Yeah,
Almost to like I wouldn't go so
cult.
far as to say OCD, but almost to those levels sometimes.
Yeah,
And it maybe you will find this yourself. I certainly have that like as you get older, you notice that you do things that he did.
yep.
Yeah. And it starts to scare you. You're like, oh no. I'll pick out some attention to detail thing that I'm really fixated on and be like, oh, this is totally something dad would have been like, really eyed on. And
Yep.
but he's mellowed out a lot, I found over the years. Like as he got older, he sort of got super, super less rigid about sort of stuff like that.
Yeah, my dad was the very stereotypical dad. Read his westerns, watched his detective shows,
Nice.
loved camping. And I was like, oh, camping is like
Throwing the old
worst
football
thing ever.
around. You know where the camping kid?
No, not at all. I
No.
needed a TV.
Mm, that's funny. So when you were doing the video game work, were you working what were you working on? Oh no, sorry. Yeah, what stores were you working in? Like
I worked at CompuCenter, and I worked at EB Games before when it was still Electronics Boutique.
right, right, right.
And
So
then
what
I worked at the last game store. And
oh, it was the last game store. Okay. The one that was in Dartmouth.
Yeah.
That's funny because a buddy of mine used to live there, and he's a power engineer and he worked at the plant. And I remember when I used to go visit him, I used to take the bus up, and because I just was working here, but I was only young, like in my early 20s, and here in Truro, so I would go hang out with him, and we usually went there because it was within walking distance of his apartment, and yeah, it was a cool little store,
Yeah. I
like.
miss it sometimes. I like having my own business, but at the same time, I like not being the boss sometimes too.
Well, you've been running that store for quite a while now, haven't you?
13 years this May.
Wow. So was like it's wild to me, like, because running comic store is awesome. Like, I'd love to have Cal on here sometime, but he's like too busy. I've had Dave on before, and I talked to him. And I talked to Jeff Smith from Comic Hunter. So like the idea of like taking something you love, like I know Cal mentioned to me one time that when he opened his comic store, he had to stop collecting comics because he just couldn't like it was just too much. Like
Yeah.
the ability you'd never make any money because you spend it all on stuff for yourself. But I think he said he kept like Flaming Carrot, which is like his favorite thing in the world.
That
So
sounds very Cal.
yes, very much so. So the idea of that, like, did you have a internal debate or a dialogue with yourself at that point?
Well, the big thing that I do is if something really cool comes in, like somebody, because we do a lot of trade-ins and stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
Somebody's like, "Oh, I brought in this thing." I don't want to be the guy that's like, "Oh, something cool came in. I'm taking it home with me."
Mhm.
So I always give the store first crack at it, and if something sits around forever, maybe it'll come home with me. But for the most part, I try to make sure the store and the customers get first dibs.
Oh, that's cool. Well, that's nice. So do you have like a time limit you give it, a couple weeks, a month, 2 months?
When it feels right. If it's been there a while, and I was like, "Oh, nobody's getting that." But there's been sometimes some statues will come in. I'm like, I'm gonna mark that just a little bit higher. Hopefully nobody buys it. And if they buy it, I'll feel better because I made more money. But if they don't buy it, then it can come home with me. So
Nice. Do you
sometimes
find
it works, sometimes it doesn't.
and how is your relationship with the average comic fan? Like what is like over the years, what have you found the this is the stuff I'm interested in when talking to like comic people working comic stores because you're the guys in the front lines, like you're the ones dealing right with the sea of humanity that's dredging in to get the newest
Yeah.
popular thing. Like, are the avid collectors like the multiple covers people still a thing? Like I haven't seen it myself out there. I know it's still kind of an
It all
industry,
depends.
but
Like for me, I do that with anything like Transformers or G.I. Joe related, or Black Cat. I'll get anything that's multiple covers for that. But your average customer will usually either get cover A, or if cover B or C is really cool, they'll grab that. Variants are still popular, but they're not the be all end all. A lot of guys are just like, yeah, I want the comic I'm going to read. I read it, and it goes in a bag and board, never to be read again.
hmm. Do you find the one thing I always laugh about, like, because even just as a comic fan, I have is like when someone finds out I'm into comics, they're like, "Oh, I have a copy of this comic. It's like Darkhawk #1. Now, like it must be worth something." And it's like, nah. It's like
Spawn
not
number one. Like
really.
almost every week, somebody's like, "Hey, I got Spawn number one. How many $1,000 is that worth?" And I was like, "Absolutely nothing." They're
Yeah.
like, what? It's like it was the most printed comic of the '90s. Everyone has at least one copy.
Even like the first appearance of Venom isn't worth that much. Like it's like $300 maybe, 200,
Yeah,
300
something like
bucks.
that.
Like or Carnage isn't that far off either. I remember I made because I collected all the Walking Dead comics when they came out, and I remember as the series was getting popular, I kind of made a decision in my head because the compendiums weren't that expensive, and I think I got a few of them for cheap. I
Yeah.
decided it was the first time I was like, I'm just going to sell them because I can get way more out of them than I'll read the compendium if I want to read the book,
Yeah.
and then I just don't need the single issues hanging around because I have stacks of boxes in my basement, not as much anymore, but I've kind of pulled back a bit over the years. I mostly just collect Spider-Man now, which Spider-Man's always been my guy too. So.
Nice.
Well, and what about the collectors like the toy markets? I know you guys focus real hard on that. Like, or I don't know if you focus on it, but it's certainly something I see a lot on your social media.
Yeah. No, toys are huge. Um, right now, it's basically 80s and 90s are still the king. Like Transformers, G.I. Joe, He-Man, Ninja Turtles, Power Rangers is a little bit less than it was a while ago, but there's still people that are looking for that kind of stuff. And yeah, they're still making new stuff to this day.
Yeah. Do you find like I guess whatever's like popular on Netflix, like when Sweet Tooth came out on Netflix, is there an interest in that book? Like,
Absolutely
re-
nothing. No, for some things are huge, and then some things that don't have comics, like what was it? Good Omens came out, and people are like, "What do you have for Good Omens?" And I'm like, "Nothing. There's a pop figure coming out in 6 months." But yeah, no, like Walking Dead sold really well as graphic novels for us when the show was at its peak.
Mhm.
Like we couldn't keep the volumes in stock. Invincible is one that, and The Boys does really good for us
Yeah.
in graphic novels and in toys.
I guess it's ones that like aren't too far away from the source material in a way.
Yeah,
Like I love the Preacher comics, and I know the series got like 3 or 4 seasons,
yeah,
which were good, I thought. But I don't know if that would have hit as hard as the Boys would, because the Boys is like superheroes are in it, even though it's
yes,
kind of a skewering of the end of them. It still hasn't deviated that far from it. Like
no,
I imagine Watchmen didn't like the Watchmen book always sold well anyway, regardless of the series. But I
yes,
can't imagine there was a great influx of people wanting the toys and everything else.
no. Like Watchmen, like when the TV show came on, people were like, oh, they're interested, and then they were like, oh, this is nothing like the show I'm watching on TV. I don't care now.
Yeah, and but the show, like the HBO show, was very good.
I was
And
surprised it was a one season show. I thought it was something they would keep going.
I know it's almost like a weird. I don't know if I can totally buy it as a sequel. It's like a weird like parallel universe that you just have to accept that this is the sequel there, because it's definitely a sequel to the comic, not the Zack Snyder movie, because of
Yes.
the inclusion of the squid.
The
And
squid
then
always makes everything like, oh, there we go. And it's definitely not the movie.
yeah, and even the depiction of like making it primarily about like race relations in the States, more so than just this sort of Ayn Rand kind of power struggle structure and morality
Cold
tale, I
War and all
guess.
that jazz.
Yeah, but it certainly was the book that like opened my eyes as a kid to the possibilities of comics more than just
Yeah.
I mean, obviously that came out when I was quite young, but when I eventually got to it and read it, I was just blown away with like, because you read dark comics like The Dark Knight Rises and those sort of things in Arkham Asylum, but they didn't really feel like they made you think about the real world
Yes.
and grapple with morality of your own morality a little bit. And Watchmen was the first book to kind of do that for me, I think, and probably a lot of people.
Yeah, there's a difference between it's like a popcorn horror movie versus like an action movie that actually has a heart and soul kind of thing.
Mhm.
Like, yeah, you can have violence and darkness for the sake of it, but then there's also the possibility it could just be a really good book.
That's true. Yeah. And I feel like narratively that sometimes that gets lost. Like people get really hung up in like I feel like comics are interesting in a way because if it's like a character, it's going to sell. If it's Spider-Man, they're probably going to sell.
Yeah.
If it's Wolverine, they're probably going to sell it. But sometimes they'll put out a really cool book that really has something to say, like The Vision, like the miniseries
Oh, the
they
vision
did.
was so good. The one where he lived in his house and stuff.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Or like Tom King's Miracle Man or something like that. Something just really wild that's kind of different, but not that necessarily. Even Dan Slott's Silver Surfer, which I thought was a really cool comic, but I don't think was probably like hugely, consumed by the normal
Silver
comic fans.
Surfer never is.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, that's a book that they drag it out every couple years for a mini series, and it comes and goes, and nobody really cares.
Yeah, they got to like slap Thanos in it or something to try to
Yeah,
generate some interest.
like the closest was they did the Mike Allred one a few years
Yeah,
ago.
that's the Dan Slott one.
As it is,
He
okay,
wrote it, yeah.
yeah, yeah. The art was the selling point on that book, and yeah, we did good on that one. But that was the first time Silver Surfer has been like interesting to people since like Planet Hulk when he didn't really do much.
Right. It's weird because like he kind of just made Silver Surfer like Doctor Who.
Yeah,
Like, yeah, which was kind of cool. Like I like that idea of a Silver Surfer story. It was just him, wandering around space with a human companion and, you know, getting into weird hijinks with various species and stuff,
as you do.
as one should. The space stuff in Marvel's always been a draw for me. But it's never been huge. That's why the Guardians movies were like really enjoyable because you got a little bit of that.
Yeah,
But like I want to see like Terrax and Morg and like Galactus. I think we're gonna get
Space
more of that.
Knight.
Yeah, exactly. The Jack of Hearts. Like I want to see all these characters.
Yeah, like one of the guys that works with me, he's just like, I want ROM to show up so bad and something. He's like, Hasbro owns ROM. They do Marvel toys. Come on, guys, get together.
Well, apparently, like I read somewhere that James Gunn wanted Bug from Micronauts to be one
Oh,
of his
interesting.
characters, but he couldn't get the rights cleared for any of the movies for them to use them. But I guess he was a big Micronauts fan, and
Nice.
and nothing disappointed
Another
me.
great toy comic that outlasted its toy line.
Yeah, seriously, that I actually went on my way to try to collect all of them, the original run, and I managed to
Nice.
do it eventually, which was really cool because that and the Rom comics are like two of those old toy properties that like. Although Rom was Rom a comic first or a toy first?
I don't know, but I'm willing to bet toy first and then comic.
Yeah, because the comic seems to have way overshadowed whatever the toy did.
Yeah, like the toy was really cool for its time, but like I don't think anybody cares about that toy anymore. I think they've only made 3 ROM toys in the last 50 years.
Still riding on that Rom energy. Yeah, but
That Frank Miller cover for #1.
yeah, still riding high on that.
Yeah.
Um, Speaking of like Frank Miller comics, I guess, and those sort of what did you guys get that Donald Duck, the controversial Donald Duck cover that he did?
No, I did not.
No.
I can only imagine after seeing the last few covers he's done, it was probably something.
Yeah, well, he's, not that this is a controversial show by any means, but I don't know what happened to him. I feel like someone once said that 9/11 kind of broke his brain, and I'm kind of inclined to agree that he sort of just
Yeah.
seemed to go to lunch after that, and he never came back.
Well, I remember we wanted to do that Batman comic where he like fought the Taliban or something, and
Holy
he's
terror, yeah,
no, and then he just ended up making it something else. It was basically Batman.
yeah. Well, even the Batman and Robin, All-Star Batman and Robin comic he did, which was like wildly weird. You know,
I'll call my car the goddamn Batmobile if I want to.
I'm the goddamn Batman. Well, I guess trend wise, like what do you feel like over the years of being, in comics, like compared to 13 years ago when you started and now, like what are the trends? Like what are people looking for?
One thing that we've noticed is DC Comics is getting weaker and weaker every year, it seems.
Really?
People still love their Batman and their Superman, but like whenever there's a movie, it just seems to make people less interested in whatever that movie is tied to. So like when Green Lantern came out, that tanked Green Lantern for probably 5 or 6 years.
Wow.
And like Justice League, I don't even I don't even think there is a Justice League comic right now. I think they're going to relaunch it in Absolute Power. So like the Justice League's never been a big thing. Whereas Avengers, there's like 4 Avengers titles at any given time, and they still sell really well. So yeah, we sell a lot of Batman, we sell a lot of Superman, but that's about it.
Interesting. But the average comic, like, would you feel like people buying individual comics have just dipped over the years, or is it still kind
Yeah,
of
it
stayed the
definitely has
same?
its ebbs and flows. And like DC seems to be the series that a lot of people will buy stuff in graphic novel, but won't buy it in issues. And Marvel's kind of people are like, oh, I'll buy them in issues, and when you get a run of something, I'll buy it as a graphic novel. But DC seems to sell better as graphic novels, at
Hmm.
least for us.
Well, interesting. I guess like the shows that have come out that have been based on like Image Comics, like you know for instance, Invincible and things like that, like they've seemed to have kind of had a bit of a resurgence in that manner. I mean, Invincible's pretty close to reading the comic just by watching the
Yeah.
show. They don't deviate very far from it.
No, like I was surprised when they did the crossover where Spider-Man shows up in the cartoon. Like he's not Spider-Man, but he's voiced by Spider-Man and he looks like Spider-Man.
Yeah, and well, they even went like pretty far with the what was the guy's name? It wasn't Doc Ock, but it was like obviously an analog for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was fun. I forgot that they had done that this past season. But even like, do you find people coming in, for instance, to buy The Boys, like surprised by how further that comic goes than the show does?
It's always like Invincible seems to be the complete opposite of the boys because Invincible is kind of basically the same.
Yes.
Where the boys, people are like, well, what's going on here? Why I was reading it and Black Noir is Homelander. I don't understand. And I was like, yeah, it's very different. It starts off and then they basically split off almost immediately.
Well,
Like,
even the idea that they all don't want to have powers. Like they all like
yeah,
in the comic, the first thing they all get is shot up
all
with
get
the compound
powers.
V, yeah, so they can have powers to fight the superheroes.
That's like would have people come in. It's like, I bought this Walking Dead. Where's Daryl Dixon? And it's like, he's not in the comics. What? He's the most important character. And it's like, that might be true, but he's not in the comics.
Yeah. I guess and that's interesting that people actually come and complain to you about it.
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
people
like,
we're bartenders. We hear everyone's problems.
really. That's funny. Well, like, do you find it like interesting on the level of like the average fan that comes in and how much of the like I don't want to get too deep into like the comics gatey stuff or like the gatekeepers that have their definitive way comics should be read and enjoyed and are very judgy of people that are in other things. Do you find that that sort of mentality has softened over the years? Like you get less of that sort of stuff?
There are definitely, we have some customers that are like, I don't want to say complicated, but they're like, yeah, all these gays and stuff in my
Yeah.
comics. Oh, they're the people who don't unironically read X-Men and don't get the message at
Oh
all.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
But yeah, no, for the most part, like in the 13 years, I went from selling comics to people that look exactly like me to different races, different sexual identities. Yeah, it's different people in general. It's just the market has changed, and I point a lot of that at Miles Morales and the Black Panther.
Really?
Black Panther movie, after that came out, I saw more African Canadian men in their, like, let's say 15 to 30 going, oh man, did you know there's a Batman, but he's in Marvel and he's black? And I'm like, yeah, he's really cool. And like Miles Morales, seeing all these kids like, I can have my own Spider-Man. I think that's awesome. Now, there's of course people who are like, nope, Spider-Man, there's only one Spider-Man, his name's Peter Parker. But no, like I think it's awesome if somebody can find a character they can latch onto the way I latched onto my characters. All the power makes us all better.
I agree. I've never understood that sort of like, I mean, I know I've talked about it before, but like when people complain that there's a woman Doctor Who or that there's a female Ghostbusters movie, it's like nobody's taking it from you. Like, go, the other ones are still there. Go watch them. If this isn't for you, let it go and wait until it is for you again. But don't ruin it for everyone else. Like, don't just be judgy and shitty because it's not the version you want. Like, give it a
Yeah.
shot. Maybe you'll enjoy it, like, um,
I
yeah,
listened
that,
to a podcast, Mr. Sunday Movies,
mm,
and they were talking about how a lot of white men from that have grown up with this are like, oh yeah, I can talk about a character and see myself as Optimus Prime or as Wolverine or as the Hulk, but I can't watch something that's got a woman in it. That's ridiculous.
yeah, heavens
Yeah, it's funny.
no.
People are like, yeah, we're so open-minded to a robot or an alien, but oh man, I can't read this book. There's a girl as the main character.
Yeah, it kind of lays bare some pretty brutal prejudice people have, and like it seeps out in weird ways. Like, I'm sure if you were to ask anybody what their opinion of women was, they'd be like, "Oh, it's women are great, like whatever." But then the next will be to complain about something like that. They're like, "Oh, a Green Lantern's a woman in this. That's dumb. I can't get behind this." And it's like, I mean, there's a squirrel that's a Green Lantern. There's a piece of broccoli that's a Green Lantern. Why can't you accept a
Yeah,
female human woman with a Green Lantern ring? Why is that? Why can't your brain process that?
I
It's
can
because you
understand
have,
why is Sinestro's daughter a Green Lantern?
yeah, exactly. And it's like, there's this sort of incel culture that sort of permeates kind of the Venn diagram of some of those people with the comic people. It goes over a bit, and you get these like really problematic and shitty attitudes that kind of come out of it. But yeah, I definitely run into a few of them in my travels as well. Anytime someone says like go woke and go broke or something like with
Yeah,
Disney, it's like fuck off, man. Like come on.
yeah, like I just don't understand. Like if something's not for you, just don't watch it.
People can't. They can't. It's like a personal attack on you.
Yeah,
If some fandom that you like has made a decision you don't agree with, you take it personally and then you like try to ruin the thing you love. It's like just go enjoy the thing you love of it.
yeah. Like my
It's
favorite thing is Transformers, and in the 40 years that I've been watching Transformers, we went from the show I grew up with and the comics I grew up with, and then bam, we go into Beast Wars like 10 years after the fact, and then Beast Machines, and then there was a bunch of years where it was all anime based, and then we had the live action movies. And I was like, yeah, I love Transformers. There's some that are definitely not made for me, but for the most part, I enjoy everything. I could see some nugget of enjoyment out of everything.
No, that's good. I mean, that's kind of the right sort of Phantom way to be. Like I'm not a big fan of the Michael Bay movies.
They're not good. I will honest like
I gave them a lot of
that one
shots.
almost broke me. I was like, do I like Transformers?
I gave it a lot of shots. I think it was right around the time they did like the night one or the first night or whatever the one that was
Last night,
called.
that was the one.
That's where I was like, I kind of checked out and didn't bother with any of them since that one. Although I did watch Bumblebee and I did really
Bumblebee's
like
so
that one.
good.
Yeah, I was like, why can't we just do that? I want more of that one. And now they're like, didn't they tease like a crossover of the G.I. Joe in the last
Sure
one? So,
did.
no, great. We'll get that then.
Chris Hemsworth's in the new G.I. Joe Transformer movie.
Oh, is he?
Yeah. They didn't say
No.
who he is, but I'm assuming he's going to be Duke.
Nice. That'll be fun. I mean, it's this, I guess this would just shoe the G.I. Joe movies they made before.
I would hope so, because they also were great. The last one, the Snake Eyes movie, was the first movie I had seen after COVID. And I was like, all right, I'm going to see a movie, got my popcorn. And I was like, what did I just watch?
Oh God, I didn't even bother with that one. And like, it's weird because like when we were kids, I assume we're about, how old are you if I'm asked?
47.
Okay, I'm 38. So, you look good for 47, dude.
Well, thank you. You look awful for 38.
You're right. It's being a professional wrestler has done that to me. I like to me. But yeah, like when we were kids, it was like a desert of
Yep.
comic stuff, right? Like that's probably why those Batman movies did well because you latched on to the thing. Like you're finally like, there's a comic movie I can watch. Like,
Yep.
Blade. I was like, I even liked the Ben Affleck Daredevil movie when I was a kid because I'm like, here's more superhero stuff. It's like you don't get it very often. Yeah, I might get a new Spider-Man movie every 3 years or something, but in between it, I got subpar. Even like when they made a Man-Thing movie that was like
Yep.
straight to sci-fi, I was like, oh, I want to watch that. Like,
Michael Chiklis' Man-Thing. This is awesome. Like, for
was
me,
Michael Chiklis Man-Thing in that?
I'm pretty sure he was.
Wow, that's funny. The Thing was Man-Thing.
But like for me, I think I was in like grade 10 or 11 in the 90s, and the Generation X movie was on TV.
Oh, we watched it recently on the X-Men podcast. I do.
Oh, it's awful.
It's atrocious. It's very bad.
And like I was like, oh man, I can't wait. It's gonna be on TV and it's X-Men. Oh, this is gonna be awesome. And then yeah, it was not.
Interesting fact we discovered while doing that podcast was that the guy that played Banshee in it actually did the voice of Banshee on the X-Men cartoon, the Fox one.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and that's the only interesting thing about that movie. Like Matt Frewer is doing like a weird Jim Carrey as the mask impersonation for the whole movie. Like it's
Yep.
very wild. Very,
I
very
love
wild.
that man too, though.
You like what?
I love Matt Rohr.
Oh yeah, Matt Frewer's the man. But it's just a wild movie. But that's what I mean. At that point, I remember seeing the ads for that in Wizard magazine and being excited
Yep.
about it. I never got a chance to see it because I didn't have the cable, but I think I may have tried to figure out a way to get to my grandmother's when it was coming out so I could go see it, but that never happened.
It'll be on Tuesday night, Grandma. You need to record it, and I'll be there on Saturday.
Oh God, no. She definitely does not know how to use a VCR. She's still around, actually. I just helped her move the other day. She just turned
Oh, wow,
she's
that's
80,
awesome.
88 now.
Nice.
But it's funny because I was doing something and I was wearing shorts and I have tattoos, but I have like some on my leg. I have pretty prominent like squid tentacles coming up my leg.
Yeah.
And she was like, "What's that in your leg?" And I'm like, "What?" Like she thought I hurt my leg or something. And I'm like, "Oh, it's a tattoo." And she's like, "What?" And she's looking at it. She goes, just shaking her head. And she's like, "I think you have enough. You don't need any more of those." And I kind of laughed. My uncle was helping, and he said she's pretty old school. He said, especially if she sees a woman with tattoos, she's like, "Would you look at that?"
Only people that have tattoos are sailors.
That's right, and prisoners, I guess. But it's crazy how far it's come. Like, just I assume for you seeing a whole, I guess in 13 years, because so 11 you would have started.
Yep,
2011.
2011.
So we still like the Marvel universe was still chugging along at that point.
Yeah, it was just we had like Thor and X-Men and Thor and Avengers,
Iron Man,
and then boom, it just exploded from there.
because that was like how much it's come into the mainstream in the past,
Yeah.
like, 15 years has been an insane amount of, like, for instance, this is something that I always talk about whenever someone asks me about the Big Bang Theory, because as a nerd,
Yeah.
people assume you like the Big Bang Theory. I really don't.
Yeah.
I'm if you like it, great. It's not for me though. And you're talking about the comic store, people coming in of different like races and religions and genders. Um, like I remember I caught an episode when they like the girls walk into the comic store and it's like all the nerds in there are like shocked. There's women in the comic store, and like I
Yeah.
think we've evolved beyond this.
Yeah.
Like as a society, like it's okay for women to be into nerdy things. Like it's just, and maybe there was a time and place that would have happened, but I don't think it's now.
Yeah.
Like it just, it seems like to try to perpetuate the stereotype that, women
You can't
are
talk to girls.
yeah, like, yeah, like you can't be like, if you're into nerdy stuff, you just can't be a socially adept person.
One thing I will say about Big Bang Theory is my father and mother understand me more based on Big Bang Theory than they ever did with all the years of me living with them.
That's actually, that's a good point. I will accept that.
Uh,
'Cause-
Big Bang Theory is like nerd light. It gives people normies a little taste of nerd culture. Like my mom will still come into the store and she'll go through the package and go, got it, need it, which is like one of the jokes from the
yeah,
show.
yeah, I
That's
remember.
the one thing that she always does.
That's funny. Well, hey, I mean, it's like I said, it's not for me. I'm happy it's out there.
Yeah,
And yeah, and I just always found the humor was like they're playing D&D, and that's the joke. It's not, there's nothing funny or clever about it. It's just the fact
yeah,
they're playing Dungeons and Dragons is the joke.
yeah. And then
So
you've
it's
got Community, which is the complete opposite.
yeah, which actually did some really funny stuff with that.
Yeah.
It made it clever and unique and kind of its own thing, its own voice, which is something I deeply appreciate more for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. So what do you think the future of the industry is? What's coming down the pipeline? Do you have any seer like abilities now that you've
None
seen enough
whatsoever. But I know that this summer is definitely going to be the summer of Deadpool and Wolverine.
Right. Was Deadpool always kind of a popular character? Like within
So there was a time Deadpool and Harley Quinn were huge,
hmm,
and then they both just kind of dropped off. People are like, oh, people love the look of both characters, but they didn't want to read their books.
really?
So
That's
like there was
surprising.
a time that Harley had 4 books and Deadpool had 4 books, and now I think Harley has one or maybe two. And Deadpool just started back up with its new #1, and he's got 2 books right now. And of course, one is the Deadpool Wolverine.
Of course. Yeah. That's the other interesting part about it too, is Marvel DC never seemed to care too much about keeping their comics in line with their movies.
Yes.
Like I remember when they came out with like the Batman Begins and the Dark Knight Rises and all that stuff. Like it wasn't like Dick Grayson was Batman.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't, and he was for quite a while. So like they never seemed too hung up on that. Well, Marvel seems very much hung up on that. Like the
Yeah.
characters, Star-Lord changed to look like he did in the movie. All those, everything kind of begins to mirror what the movies have
Yeah.
established.
Like look at Thor's costume. It changed to be very much like the movies.
Right. Yeah. And even like the Guardians kind of got their designs got changed to look more like the
Oh yeah, like
movies.
Drax for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is funny because they made him sort of gray in the movies because they didn't want too many green people.
Yeah.
So it's funny how that works. We often talked about that in the X-Men podcast with the blue because like we've just watched X-Men Apocalypse and
Yeah.
like there's a lot of blue people in that movie. There's Beast, there's Nightcrawler, there's Mystique, there's Apocalypse, is very shades of blue. Like it just kind of gets a bit, yeah, as it goes. Understand it, but the comics were sort of created in a vacuum. Like they didn't have these sprawling universe to take that into account.
Exactly. Like, oh, what can we do? That doesn't matter. It's never going to be a big budget movie. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, exactly. We'll let them figure it out when the time comes. Yeah, the Harley Quinn thing's interesting to me too. It's one of those as a nerd, whenever I see a girl with a Harley Quinn tattoo, it's kind of a red flag for me. It's sort of, especially if it's one where it's her and the Joker and they're like in some like the dance pose from the famous Alex Ross one or something.
Yeah,
I've seen that one quite a bit. And I'm always like, oh, you don't understand how that relationship works.
that relationship is problematic and was problematic back then.
But that's, I guess, something else interesting. Like, do you find that the interest, like, because right now there's sort of an ongoing jokes and stuff on the internet about the boys and how like the Homelander isn't supposed to be a character you're supposed to like,
Yeah.
and how there's sort of like this, you miss the point about what this character is by like same with Rorschach from
Yeah.
Watchmen. Like Alan Moore's like, you're not supposed to like
Rorschach
him.
is cool looking, but he's also crazy.
Yeah, he's a racist, he's a misogynist, he's a
Yeah.
lunatic. And sure he has a moral line in the sand that he will never cross, which is commendable with it, but he's a complex character. Like the Punisher's another one. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, Rick Sanchez from Rick and Morty's another one. Like, there's just these characters that like they're entertaining, but whether you should idolize them is a whole other point.
Yeah. I always find it hilarious when it's like, oh man, the Punisher's so cool. I'm like, is he?
If he were real, you wouldn't think so.
Also not as smart, and he just kills things.
Yeah, if he was real, you probably would disagree.
Yeah.
Like if there's a real guy killing indiscriminately, if your kid was like decided to become got wrapped up with a gang and got mowed down by this guy when just because he was, selling weed or something at
Yeah.
whatever time period this would have been, your opinion may have changed of how cool a vigilante that operates inside the system would actually be.
Well,
Especially
yeah.
one that murders, the other
Yeah.
ones, at least they go to jail or whatever.
Well, that's like Civil War, the comic series,
Mhm.
when he meets Captain America and he's like, "Oh, Captain America, I'm a big fan." And Captain America's like, dude, I don't think you're doing anything in my name. No, no."
But he even says that, like, they try to do that in the comics because, like, there's a big thing when cops are like wearing the Punisher's skull,
Yeah.
and then they did a whole story where the Punisher's like, "You're supposed to be better than me. Like,
Yeah.
I'm a broken monster that kills people because I have to keep them away. You're supposed to work within a system. You don't idolize a guy like me." And I respect that they try.
Yeah.
They try to course correct. They even try to change the skull for a while.
Yeah. Well,
To,
that did make people mad. A lot of people were like, and not like, "Oh, I just love the Punisher." People were like, "I don't like that new symbol. It's stupid looking. He looks like a pirate."
yeah, they try to make it sort of uh like like a ninja, like because he was
Yeah,
wrapped up with a hand and stuff,
the
right?
hand and stuff like that. But yeah, it just didn't look right.
Yeah, but it's just I find it interesting when like people miss the point of these things, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's almost like a way to justify being kind of crazy. It's like to idolize something like this, then instead of like take ownership over whatever issues you have.
Yeah, like, well, because back to the boys, like, I guess probably one of the reasons why they changed it, spoiler warning for the boys comic from 10 years ago, Black Noir being Homelander, because he did a lot of the stuff that Homelander got blamed for. But they're like, nope, we're
Yeah,
making sure Homelander's a bad guy.
he thought he blacked out.
Yeah,
He didn't. He would black out, and then there'd be images of him doing horrible stuff, and he thought it was him. That
yeah,
this is actually one of the coolest revelations of the comic, and one of the most disappointing parts of the show to me that they're not doing that.
yeah,
I know I haven't watched the new season yet, but I know that there's a new Black Noir, and I was excited because I was like, oh, maybe I'm going to get it now. But I guess the showrunner said they're not doing that.
I don't know what the showrunner said, but I'd be very surprised because he seems to be just like an actor pretending to be Black Noir.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the joke, and I think people realize they're not going to go down that route with the show, which is fine. I mean, they got to make it different. But I was very happy when they did that Diabolical series where
Oh
they
yeah,
had,
the cartoon.
yeah, and they had the one that was like very much just the comic adapted with the actual voice actors and all that. Because they even had Simon Pegg do the voice of Huey, and the way he was sort of designed, his design was in the initial
Yeah,
comics.
before he aged out of playing himself.
Yeah, well, I mean, the show's I know people think the show is extreme, and it is, but it's
Yeah.
quite neutered by the way the comic goes.
Oh yeah.
The comic is like 10 times more extreme than the series is.
Yeah.
But it was so interesting because to me, it always depicted if superheroes were real, like say in our world we actually had people with powers. That's pretty much what it would be like, I would imagine.
Yeah.
They would sort of be celebrities and they would not really have to answer for the shit they pull. And, it'd be more about reality shows and product placement and advertisements than it would be about actually making a real difference to humanity.
Yeah. The chances of getting an actual Superman are very slim.
Yeah. I think we could use one, but
Yeah.
I don't think, I think that comic has always done a much better representation of what the real world would probably be like, and even some of the more extreme
Whether we
gross
don't
parts of it.
like it or not.
Yeah, yeah. Well, humans are. I often say I'm kind of not a fan of humanity in general. And so I always say I like persons. I'm not a fan of people. So maybe some enterprising superhero will come along and change my opinion someday.
I'll be the one for you, Andre.
Oh, thank you, Darryl. So what's coming up at the store? What do you got? Anything going on?
No, nothing spectacular I can think of. Just we got this week's comics come out on Wednesday, well, except for DC, which comes out tomorrow.
Oh, is DC regularly early now?
Yeah, DC's on Tuesday and everyone else is on Wednesday, just to make sure everything's different and annoying a little bit.
Well, DC doesn't go through Diamond anymore, does it?
They do not. Marvel does and doesn't, depending. There's a few different companies you can go through, but yeah, DC's completely gone.
Interesting. Well, I wouldn't mind chatting with you about Diamond for a minute if you want. I don't think they're going to listen and judge you if you speak ill of them. But I used to help out. I remember at the comic store in Truro when it was here. I remember one time when we were waiting for our Diamond orders to come in, you sold us the extra comics so that we could get to fill our orders.
Yeah.
So I would drive up and get them from you for a couple of days or a couple of weeks. But I mean, that system, a lot of people online complain about Diamond and the difficulties of navigating it and the expensiveness of navigating it. Has anything changed in that market, or is it still just a complete shit show?
Yeah, they're still basically the same. Like people like it's funny, people who aren't in the industry will come to us like, oh, isn't Diamond awful? They've got a monopoly. And it's like, they have a monopoly because nobody else cares.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I'm like, yeah, like it's a problem, but at the same time, I kind of hate it more now than I used to.
Hmm.
When I first started up until just 2019 or whatever, I would get one book a month. I would do my order for everything, and then I'd be done. Now it's like, oh, hey, do you want your Boom Studios and your Dark Horse? Cool, that's through Diamond. Do you want your Marvel? That's through Penguin Random House. Do you want your DC? Well, that's through Universal. So basically, now I have more work for the same amount of money.
Yeah. That's brutal. I always wondered about that because when I saw that DC was leaving, I was like, well, that's got to be a big hit for them
Yeah.
because, but I remember we would get boxes like at the store in Truro where it would be like a massive box for like two comics, right?
So
Uh,
I can one up you there. So Penguin Random House, they have free shipping, which is great.
that is fantastic.
But they are so like they'll basically like, cool, here's your new books that you've ordered. They'll come in a box. All right, cool. I also reordered 5 comics and I did 5 orders throughout the day. They won't put those in one box. They will
Oh,
ship 5 boxes with one book in them over and over again.
really?
Yeah, and I'm like, there's got to be a better way because I'm not trying to be like, oh, the environment, but I'm like, it's got to be a waste of money, resources, and the environment to do that.
Yeah, Jesus. That's wild.
Yeah, we'll get this little box, we'll open it up, and like, oh, there's one comic book in it.
It must have been like because they would do that. You get a full box, and then you get one other box that had 5 comics in. It's like surely you could have put those on top in the
Yeah,
other box. Like it must have been a weight thing. I'm guessing. I don't know, but
I have no idea, but it's
yeah,
gone.
certainly is. Well, I'm glad there's people like you out there, waving the flag and keeping the comic store vibrant and relevant. I guess in this ever shifting society when it comes to that sort of stuff.
Yeah, no, we love making people happy, which is goofy and stupid to say, but I do really enjoy like Free Comic Book Day when we're giving out free comics and we see these little kids coming in and you're like, yeah, that's what we do the job for.
I
Get the
I,
next generation as interested as we can so they could stop reading for 10 years to come back later when they're in their 20s.
gonna say, get that young kid who doesn't want to become a construction worker. Give him some
Exactly.
hope. Give him some hope for the future. Well, that's it's funny that you say that because I like when I used to help out at the store here. I remember I ran into a woman. I think she was organizing the exhibition. I was going to do some wrestling stuff there, and
Nice.
she had told me she had met me before because she brought her kid in, and I had suggested some comics for him, and he really got into reading and enjoyed it through the comics I'd suggested, and it meant a lot to me. And I imagine you get to see that a
Yeah.
lot more, like every day. Essentially, you get to kind of get that nice feeling.
Yeah, the only downside of the feeling is when those kids grow up and they're in their like 19, 20 years old, and you're like, oh, I remember when you were a little kid. Now I feel old.
Mm.
We had this one little girl, and I think she was 6 when she came with her dad to our first free comic book day. And then I saw her like last year, and I was like, oh, wow, you've grown up. And then I was like, oh my, you're like 18 now. Like, it's like seeing my children grow up in front of me.
How's the work life balance? Like, are you able to? Do you find yourself working more and more? Like, I know I'm self employed too, and I understand that you never really turn it off. Like, you just keep going
Yeah,
and going. I certainly do.
it's one of those things like I try to not do as much work when I'm home. Like I'll do my emails and stuff like that, but I won't overdo the social media. But when you're out in public, I have to be Darryl from Giant Robot
Mhm.
Comics. I can't be like, oh, I'm in a bad mood. No, I'm Darryl Giant Robot Comics. If you want to talk to me about Spider-Man, it might not be long, but I'm gonna say, hey, oh yeah, the new issue, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Good to see you. It's like just common decency, and you like just got to be nice to people. So
Yeah.
my wife sometimes like so many people that you know, and I was like, ah, you've touched a bunch of lives, I guess.
Yeah, mine often, because of all the various things I do, will say the same thing. Like, I'll go somewhere, or any friends of mine, if we're out in some public event. Like, I was at the Pride Parade on Saturday, and I probably ran into like 30 people I knew, just either through wrestling, through trivia I do, through movie nights, acting with theater, through various things. And it's like, yeah, it's nice. It's nice to kind of be able to touch a
The
lot of
local
lives in various ways.
celebrity.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'll take it. I'll take it.
That's like was it Fat Apollo? He was Halley famous was his like catchphrase.
Right. Well, actually, I just won. It's funny you mentioned that because I won a Turo Famous Award last year for yeah,
Nice,
yeah, for the similarly. I miss Mike. I don't get to see him as much as I used to. I had him on the show a long time ago,
nice.
but I haven't made it to HowCon much lately because I put in applications, but I didn't get picked, and it seems like the scene and being on the thing gets harder and harder to get into just to go sell art prints and the stuff I do.
Yeah, like for us, we haven't been there since the pandemic, and we're like, is it worth it? Like, how much more money will we make versus how much are we going to have to pay to go to the event, uh, rent a truck to bring stuff to the event, staff the store? And I'm like, it's a lot of work. I'll let someone else do it.
Yeah, I kind of wonder that too. Like, it seems like every year it goes up a lot, and it's like just a guy selling art like me. It's like I don't know how tenable it is to like make it worthwhile for a whole weekend of
Yeah.
I know there's a love of it, a passion, and get to hang out with those people, which is great. But you kind of realistically you look at it at some point and go, I don't know, maybe that weekend can be better spent doing something else, at least relaxing, which is something I don't do very
It's
often.
like I spent $400 and I made negative $80. Oh,
Yeah. Woo! Yeah, passion. Well, thanks a lot for being on the show, Daryl. It
no
was fun chatting
worries.
with you. I feel like we should make a regular segment with you, just like what's going on in the comic world every
What's
once in a
going
while.
on? I'm totally down for that.
All
It's fun
right.
because I I even brought this week's comics that I was going to read, so you'd be like, "Oh, what are you reading, Darryl?" It's like, "Well, here is what I've been."
Oh, let's see it. What are you reading, Daryl?
So, like I said, I'm stupid and I buy lots of covers. So
Hmm.
I've got the graphic novel for Cobra Commander.
Cobra Commander has his own book now.
It was just a mini series and it's
Right.
over with. But yes, and it's
Interesting.
really good.
Is it like a gritty prequel about how he became Cobra Commander?
Prequel, yes, gritty somewhat, but it's still fun.
Cool.
And of course, because two different covers, I
Of
bought
course.
um, Void Rivals, Robert Kirkman's Void Rivals, which is also tied into G.I. Joe and Transformers.
Really?
Yeah, it's
Like
funny.
his take on them, or?
Well, basically, last year we ordered the Void Rivals book, and I'm like, oh, Robert Kirkman sells stuff, but Robert Kirkman in space.
Mhm.
And then, so we ordered like, let's say 10 copies is being generous. And then we find out, oh, Jetfire from the Transformers is in it the day before it comes out. So it's like a backdoor shadow thing for Transformers. So instantly people are like, oh, I need that comic now. And I'm like, oh, well, I didn't order very many. So here we go. So yeah, it's a really
Interesting.
good book. So it's got the Transformers in space. It's got its own characters. It's got a lot of the lore from like the third season of the Transformers show, which is
Cool.
really good. And then my girl Felicia Hardy, who shares a book with Mary Jane, and we got Jackpot and the Black Cat. And once again,
Nice. I'll have to check that one out too. I don't think I get that one. Well, at what point did they get rid of the jackpot they had that wasn't Mary Jane and make Mary Jane jackpot?
I don't remember because I don't like Mary Jane.
What? Come
I,
on.
I am a Felicia Hardy fan, and if Peter wants to be happy, he needs to stop chasing after Mary Jane.
Yeah. I like how comics, like, I always make the joke that the sequel is the enemy of happiness. You know, like in the movie, end of the first movie, the guy gets the girl, the villains defeat it. You know, roll credits, and then they make a
Yeah.
sequel, and it's like the guy and the girl had a fight. They're not really together anymore. Then
Yep.
then they reconnect throughout whatever villain they're fighting this time, and at the end they're back together. Then they make a third movie, and usually that girl is gone. There's no reference to her. She's not there at all. There's a
Yep.
new love interest that he's trying to get for whatever
Transformers
reason.
movies when they got rid of Megan Fox.
Yeah, exactly. And then just all of a sudden there's a new one. We'll figure that out. But comics are interesting because you get like decades, like, you know, it's decades and decades of having to make drama, so you got to put them together, take them out together, you know. And Spider-Man and Mary Jane had like a solid run until the One More Day thing where they
Yep.
undid that, and then they ended that later, and then they put him back with Felicia, then had Mary Jane have like tulpa babies in another dimension. I'm a little behind on comics, so I just caught up on that whole storyline.
And then there was when Doc Ock was Spider-Man, and he punched Felicia in the face.
Right.
He hated him for a while. And,
I liked that. It was great.
yeah.
But and that's why the
Spider-Man is the best Spider-Man. I'm sorry. He's he's the better Peter Parker when he's not even Peter Parker.
yeah. Those comics are fantastic.
Yeah.
But just like, and then that's why the Amazing Spider-Man movies never really hit with me, because like at least all the tragedy in Spider-Man's life happened over like 60 years.
Yes.
We didn't get it all in like 2 movies. Like, it just seems so dark and nihilistic. The first movie ends with Captain Stacy saying, "Stay away from my daughter, you'll get her killed." And he's like, "I will." And then he does it, and then he gets her killed in the next movie. It's like, Jesus Christ. Yeah, and then like Marvel tries to give him a happy ending with like the Far From Home story, which is great. But
I saved somebody else's girlfriend, but not my own.
yeah, the hollow victory.
Yeah. I'm going back to my own planet.
Where she's still dead.
Yep.
But hey, you know, I know they cut out was it Shailene Woodley as Mary Jane in those movies, so maybe she's still there and he's getting this happy ending. But
It's true. And Felicia Hardy was also cut out of those movies.
oh, really? Oh, right. It was what's her face? It was Anna de Armas, wasn't it, or somebody like that?
No, it's what's her Jyn Erso from Star Wars. Jones?
Yeah.
January Jones?
Uh,
One of those.
Not January Jones. That's the girl.
That's the one from X-Men.
Yeah, I always forget her name. I get her and Anna de Armas. I think they kind of look alike mixed up.
Fair, yeah.
But yeah, I know who you're talking about. Yeah. So there you go. Maybe he's got options. Maybe you're getting your happy Spider-Man ending.
That's right.
Anyway, thanks again, Darryl. I'll definitely pop into the shop sometime soon and say hi
Excellent.
next time I'm coming into town.
Deal. We'll see you at Giant Robot Comics, 114 Woodlawn Road in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia.
Perfect. Excellent plug.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks again, man.
No worries. See you now.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Andre.
There it is, my conversation with Darryl Wall. Great chat about a lot of obscure and very not obscure nostalgia, 90s, 80s, nerd stuff, which is a blast, as always. So Darryl has a deep well of that stuff, so do I. So it's kind of fun to match nostalgias, if you will. It's a great name for a podcast, Matching Nostalgias. Dueling Nostalgias. I don't have enough podcasts. Along with this one, obviously, I have my sister show, X-Rated, the X-Men Anime Review Show, with guest acquirer Davin Scalehorn. I almost called him Dave. Sorry, Davin. I know you're listening. And in that show, we watched the X-Men Fox show for the original one, and then obviously the newer version, which came out recently, and now we're kind of doing the movie since we're caught up, and then probably moving on to another X-Men show. Not quite sure which one yet, but we are working on it. So, so check that show out if you haven't liked it already. It's linked on my website. You can definitely find it through the socials. X-Rated, the X-Men Animated Review Show. In the meantime, we just recently, I know this is a few weeks out, but we recently had our Canada Day here, and it was great. Really great celebration of our country. Like every country, we have our warts, we have our dark past, our dark history, but it's all about trying to acknowledge that, learn from it, and move forward. And, as a country, I feel like Canada has a reputation globally for being, friendly and nice. And, I can think of worse reputations to have. So, pretty proud to be a part of the Canada we have now, knowing that, we all still have a lot of growing to do, as everyone does. So, that's great. But, yeah, tune. Sometimes when I'm doing these, I get like, I'm on a train, a roll, if you will, just talking. And then, just like anyone else, it just goes blank. It just goes blank, and then I got to remember, pick up where I left off. So talking about how great Canada was supposed to somehow roll into the end of the episode, and I lost the thread on how that was going to happen. But hey, let's just do it. So tune in another week's time. We'll have another great guest, another great episode, another great chat. In the meantime, stay safe, have fun, read some comics. The Graphic Histories Podcast is a proud partner of the United Federation of Podcasts.